Flotsam. As a child I walked for hours upon a strand where golden sunlight shone to find the treasures, junk and so that waves upon the beach would throw. Sand-polished glass, abrased, opaque, the tattered ruins of cod and hake, the limbs of trees so calcified, played notes so sweet when they were dried. These beaches now play host again to memories of desperate men where chance and fate won't be denied, with punctured hulls where engines died, and men in suits procrastinate and gibber, gawk and hesitate, then seek to soothe with eloquence, erect a razor wire fence. The flotsam now these days I see are boys of 8 and girls of 3, whole branches of one family are offered up now to the sea. O Neptune now does this appease, O gods of war, these refugees, the offspring of your vanities, begat of foreign policies.
On Gorta Mór, Gaelic for the Great Hunger, lasted from 1845 to 1849 and was a period of mass starvation, disease, death and immigration. In total, nearly 1 million people died from the famine in Ireland and millions were left homeless.
It wasn't too bad when the harvest was good, but now the land has gone bad. Nothing grows well anymore. I am tired of listening to that children crying with the hunger pain. Free passage, the landlord said to us last autumn. You can have free passage to a new land, a better life. I think he just wanted us off the land myself, as many people were sick and their crops had failed. But when Anne was born, I said to David, we've got to go.
Irish census figures recorded a population of approximately 8 million in the early 1840s. 1 decade later, the population had dropped by nearly 1 million. By the 1860s, and just before the US Civil War broke out, more than 1.5 million people born in Ireland were living in the United States. They constituted 6% of the country's total population and 40% of its foreign-born population. By the early 1890s, near the end of the Irish migration period, the population in Ireland was barely 5 million.
At the time, America was taking as many immigrants as it could get because it needed labor to work the cultivated lands that were being developed in the West, in the Midwest. And unfortunately, they also needed soldiers for the Civil War.
Although the vast majority of Irish immigrants left for the Americas, some found passage to India. India's Madras Presidency, or Madras Province, was established by the British in 1652. It was at Madras that the British Empire was born, and the East India Company held the commercial monopoly and assumed administrative functions in India. That lasted until 1858, when following the Indian Rebellion and the subsequent Government of India Act led to the British Crown assuming direct control of the Indian subcontinent and forming the new British Raj. My name is Ian Michael. I have Irish Indian lineage. My ancestors come from County Cork, from the town of Clonakilty. I now work and live in Dubai. During a visit to Cork, I passed through the town of Clonakilty, a beautiful, picturesque town southwest of Cork. I felt a special connection with the town, a very emotional connection. I don't know why. Later I discovered that my ancestor, John Footman, left Clonakilty in 1847. I wondered why. I discovered John Footman was a famine migrant. He left Clonakilty during the peak of the Irish potato famine in 1847. John left his home, left his family, left his town, and came all the way to India to make a home and a life in India. During the famine, millions of Irish men and women lost their lives. Millions left Ireland to other parts of the world. This is their story. This is my story. And this is the story of me discovering my Irish roots.
When you think of, we're now in this country, well, in baptism certainly, only 5% of what we were. And with all the advances in, fertilizer, farming, we're still finding it difficult to feed them. The 5% that they could feed back in the 1800s with so much more antiquated methods, and yet they were able to feed them.
Amazing.
Type of thing. It's extraordinary how they survived.
In fact, going into the famine years, the rural population of Ireland were very heavily dependent upon the potato. And it's an interesting phenomenon because the potato was only brought to Ireland by Sir Walter Raleigh the previous century. The potato was a uniquely easy crop to grow. In the moist Irish climate, you just had to throw a few old potatoes into the ground and let them take care of themselves, and in the spring you had enough potato crop to feed the family for a year. So the Irish were not eating potato before Sir Walter Raleigh, obviously. They didn't know what the potato was, but they became very heavily dependent upon the potato. Now, that corresponded with a massive expansion in the Irish population. If you look at the 1700s, but from the beginning of the 1700s to the end of the 1700s, the Irish population increased about 3- or 4-fold. Massive expansion in the population. By the famine years, Ireland's population was about half Britain's population. Whereas if you think about today, when the population of Ireland is only about 1/10 of the population of Britain. And that was largely fueled by the potato. So there are a lot of forces that go into the tragedy of the famine years. There's no question that bad landlords and rapacious agents representing absentee landlords and moneylenders who got control of land, etc., all had roles to play in and share of blame for a massive human tragedy.
During the early famine years, it was uncommon for whole families to immigrate. Typically, younger members of the family left their homes. Once established, the first migrant in the family would send for the second or third born to immigrate. This became so common that immigration became almost like a rite of passage.
Whole families
all
going away, and they call it the Irish Wake.
Oh, okay.
There was a celebration in the home before the child was leaving the following day, or the one of their, and they called it an Irish Wake. And they kind of a celebration, really, or a sad celebration in many ways. The child was leaving the following day.
Yes.
And then the Irish Wake, and then the child, and whole families like that.
Yeah.
And very often what happened is the first one, the oldest went to America.
Yes.
And then they paid for the
For
second,
rest, yes.
and the second paid for the third, and they gradually all went out.
Yeah.
And of course it was sad in a sense, but great in another sense. The choice was between here and very often starvation, or leaving home, never coming back, but at least you could make a decent life for yourself out in America.
Yeah.
predominantly the bulk of the people would have travelled across to the United States and Canada. It would have been hard to put down or to actually establish the exact figures in terms of accuracy, in terms of numbers, but we do know that Canada in 1847, there was 100,000 people would have emigrated to Canada, and of that 20,000 people would have died on the voyages and of sickness on arrival when they were in quarantine. So, you know, that was a huge, it was 20% rate of deaths. So it was, you know, the cost was very high for the people who left the country in that, and to survive was a challenge in itself, and that was before they arrived.
I remember my great-grandmother, Agnes Footman, Nana Aggie, as all the grandchildren and great-grandchildren called her. A very gentle lady, loved talking to us kids, often sharing stories of her childhood in Vepuri, Madras. Her parents were Patrick and Teresa Footman, and she loved her parents and siblings immensely. Nana Aggie and her husband Louis Francis shared 50 years of marriage, were blessed with 10 children and a very large extended family. Nana Aggie had many stories of her family roots in Clonakilty Island and memories of her grandfather John Footman, my great-great-great-grandfather. At the age of 28, I left India and migrated to Melbourne, Australia, where I joined many of my Footman cousins who had migrated before me. My great-great-great-grandfather's story is a story born of necessity and family loyalty. But John Footman did not leave for the Americas, as so many Irish migrants did, but instead traveled to India at the peak of the famine. He left the only home he ever knew and traveled to a foreign land, established a new life, married a local woman, and raised a family in his newly adopted homeland.
It's a boy.
And that's how little Maggie announced the birth of John Footman. John was born one freezing Irish evening in January 1826 to John and Joanna Collins. The Footman and Collins family came from the villages of Dundee, Dirk Cove, Donnaroo, and Lissaward. These picturesque villages were all located in the West Cork region of Ireland. Their main profession centred around farming, fishing, and stable hands at Castlefreke.
Owen Boney commanded his armies to stand. He levelled his cannon all over.
Uncle.
Young Dan.
Auntie Jones had a new baby. Come on.
Christ almighty.
His victory to gain, and he slew my light horseman in the war's calm.
I can't find, see up here now.
Enough, 18.
Oh, 5. At least 2 or 3 days
2 or 3 days.
of
The baby.
the birth.
Yeah.
And very often, most of the time, back then, the mother would be still in the hospital. And it was the father would go to the hospital, pick up the baby, and meet at the church with the godparents, while the mother was still in the hospital. Yeah, like they kept the mother in the hospital. My understanding is maybe a week, 10 days back then. But they did the baptism within 1, 2 or 3 days of birth.
Yeah, they wanted to have it very quickly into the child. Into the church.
Now, I suppose it might have been partly due, there probably was a high infant mortality rate.
Yes.
And they wanted the baby baptized in case something might happen to the baby in the family. They wanted to have the baby baptized. And so they did it very, very quickly. To give a statistic, our baptisms now are 5% of what they were pre-famine. In other words, in these books, going back to the early 1800s, you could have 250 up to 300 baptisms. Now we've 10 or 12.
This is a baptism, this is in a month, the 250, 300?
No, in a year.
In a year.
Yeah.
So almost a baptism Probably every 3 days or 2 days, yeah.
They can, they would. But we're now, the number of baptisms in the parish are 5% of what they were pre-famine.
My conversation with Father McCarthy about parish baptisms during the pre-famine years and anxious parents seeking to baptize their newborn children soon after birth at the peak of the potato famine was sobering. That my ancestor, John Footman, managed to survive to adulthood in the face of such deprivation is a testament to the resilience of the Footman family that Nana Aggie never mentioned. I was determined to learn more. Although my trip to Ireland in 2016 was not my first visit, nor would it be my last, this trip was special. Because I was coming to meet with Michael O'Mahony, an Irish genealogist who specialized in the families in West Cork County.
As you have discovered yourself, Ian, tracing family history is very exciting. And in particular, when we have something like tracing John Footman from Dundee in Castlefreagh to Madras in India. And we couldn't pass up on that opportunity to sort of trace that. My first protocol was to validate that record and to validate the siblings and the parents. And thankfully, that seems certain that they originated in Dundee, out by the Galley Head. And you had a question on your document, and I think there's a fairly simple explanation for that, is that Dirk Bay is just off Dundee, and I would expect that the priest referred to people from that area as being from Dirk because they're the same parents, so it was in the same spot. I would be fairly confident. And there may also be another very exciting possibility in that there was a Coast Guard station in Dirk, and maybe the footmans were working there, and as part of that, the priest just put in Dirk, referring to their being involved in the Coast Guard station. The next thing was to trace the siblings and what became of those. And the one interesting person, I suppose, was the oldest brother, Michael, who was born in 1818, and he married Ellen Donovan. And they stayed in Dundee. The record is there for the 1852 Griffith's valuation. So we can actually, from the map and from the reference, we can identify the spot where Michael lived.
It was interesting to learn that Michael O'Mahony's research had tracked down the home of Michael Footman, the older brother of John Footman. I was very excited. The following day, local historian Tim Feen took me to see my great-great-great-granduncle's former home. Michael Footman's...
Yeah, Michael Footman and his wife Ellen, they lived here. The census in 1901 shows them living here, and it's believed they had a shop here which they rented from a Patrick O'Driscoll.
My ancestor, my great-grandmother Agnes Footman, her granduncle. This was her granduncle's house, so it's highly emotional that, one part of my family, the roots, actually come from the land over here. During the famine years, tenant farmers and labourers in Ireland lived a precarious life, beholden to the landlord. It was not unusual to leave one farm for another. The Footmans had resided on 2 plots of land. After visiting the home of Michael Footman, Tim Feen surprised me with a visit to see the ruins of the home where John was born.
Home place was now, so you'll have to climb over the gate to get access.
The one over there?
Yeah.
And there's nothing there now?
I think the stone buildings, they're saying that was the old house. Yeah. See the old horseshoe, the horseshoe would, for luck, would have been nailed to the door for luck.
Yeah. No, I said John would have probably spent the 20-odd years of his life, probably.
Here.
Before going to India.
There's an old cartwheel in there, do you see it?
Yeah, that's probably must be for the
maybe
probably
for
transportation.
Yeah, probably, yeah. So it's great to finally nail down to the location. Yeah.
To think that all those footmen back in India.
It's fantastic, descended from here. Yeah. Hang on, Paul.
The Footman and Collins families mostly worked on the grounds of Castle Freak, owned by Sir John Freak Bart, the 6th Baron Carbery. Castle Freak has a long history dating back to the 16th century. It was destroyed by the Cromwellian forces in 1648 and later rebuilt in 1780 by Sir John Evans Freak, who brought the original castle back into family control. And since then, it has retained its present design.
The Freaks came to Ireland in the 1580s, they were the grandsons of the chief treasurer to Henry VIII, and then the three monarchs that succeeded Henry VIII, including Elizabeth, and died a very wealthy man. And he had a lot of grandchildren, but one of them came here with his son, and when I say here, to Cork, as part of the second Cork settlement in the late 1500s. And they came to Castle Freak, which was then Rathbarry Castle, which is within the walls of where we are right now, in the very early 1600s. And they initially leased this place from the Barry family. Rathbarry means fortress of the Barrys. Yes. And then they bought it off Lord Barrymore, the head of the Barry clan, in the 1620s. And in 1644, they were besieged here by the Celtic clans from the west, and this was the longest siege in Irish history within these walls. But in those days, what became Castle Freak, the walls encompassed some 7 acres, and they had a garrison of 300 soldiers. So this was the last stronghold of the British Crown in the southwest of Ireland. The family estates in those days extended some 40 miles down the coast, so they were very extensive. And one has to assume, though, that the Footmans would have been in the immediate area, and that would have been the domain, the Castle Freak domain. So they probably, if they were involved with the horses, they would probably have looked after the horses. There were some horses up at the castle itself to pull the coaches and be the immediate riding horses for the family.
God. In 1847, at only 21 years of age, John Footman left his family behind. He travelled by small boat from Bellachuan, the mouth of the harbour beach, near the village of Dundee, arriving at Cove, from which he embarked to London, where he was granted passage with the East India Company as an enlisted infantryman aboard the merchant clipper, the Kent.
John Footman had some assistance, and probably it might have been from the family, or it might have been from a senior servant here, or it might have been some other connection that would have got him sent to Britain, and with an introduction to the East India Company that got him a position there. So if he was one of the starving masses crowding into the departure ports for the ships going to America, it's very unlikely that he would have got himself into the East India Company.
This was quite unusual for the times. John Footman chose to travel in the opposite direction of the typical mass exodus of Irish famine migrants, who bought passage aboard coffin ships bound for the Americas. On the 30th of April, John Footman set sail out of the port of Chatham on the outskirts of London. With him were 227 other passengers, including 213 men, 13 women, and 1 child, all bound for the Madras presidency. The journey from London to Madras took them nearly 4 full months. The Kent anchored off the rugged coastline of Madras on the 23rd August 1847. John was enlisted with the British East India Company and seconded to their infantry division at Madras. The Madras Presidency, also referred to as Madras Province, was an administrative subdivision of British India. At its greatest extent, the presidency included most of southern India, including the present-day states of Tamil Nadu, Andhra, and Telangana, as well as parts of Odisha, Kerala, Karnataka, and the Union Territory of Lakshadweep. John's end of service papers describes him as being 5 feet 6 inches tall, of fresh complexion with hazel eyes and brown hair. John was with the British East India Company until it was disbanded after the Sepoy Mutiny in 1857, at which point the British Raj assumed control over India. John was subsequently registered with the British Army in Madras at the regimental centre at Wellington in present-day Tamil Nadu. John Footman settled in Madras, and the East India Company Army Barracks became his first home in India. John shared his accommodation with other male infantry soldiers from Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and England. Life for him in these initial years was routine and monotonous between Fort St. George, the barracks, army drills, and a regular daily mass at St. Mary's Co-Cathedral, a Catholic church located on Armenian Street in Madras. To say that India was a foreign land to John Footman would be an understatement. The weather was hot and humid most of the year, plagued with seasonal monsoons and an equal measure of dust storms. This was nothing like the cool, green pastures of Ireland. Communications were slow between India and Ireland. No doubt, John wrote home with accounts of his life in India and longed for news from Ireland. But my family has no record of such correspondence. I can only imagine how I would have felt knowing that I would never see my family again, missing them terribly. India at that time had already been exposed to Christianity, since it's believed that Thomas the Apostle traveled to India preaching the gospel of Jesus. As a devout Catholic, it must have been of some comfort for John to be able to continue practicing his religious beliefs in Madras. John was married at 30 years of age to Matilda, an Indian Portuguese girl, on the 20th of August, 1856, 9 years after arriving in India. The couple took their wedding vows at St. Mary's Co-Cathedral. Once married, army men generally left the barracks, and this is what John and his new wife Matilda would have done. They would have taken up residence in a one-bedroom home with a veranda and a kitchen dining area in the nearby suburb of Vepari.
It should be possible to identify the spot in Dundee where the footmen were. I would expect it should be.
Back in Ireland, I was feeling very special. I was standing at the home of Michael Collins, the Republic of Ireland's revolutionary freedom fighter. I was in awe, knowing that my ancestor, John Footman, not only came from the surrounds of Clonakilty, where Michael Collins was born, but also because John's mother, Joanna, belonged to the Collins clan.
But I think from being involved with you for the past few days, it's very exciting for me, and I hope for you, that we've actually located the spot in Dundee where John Footman left in 1847. So hopefully we'll be able to tie that up as well. We may not be able to tie the blood relationship between you and them, but it's another exciting piece to your story, that you have relatives in the area, lots of them, and scattered. They'll be very surprised and excited to find that they have relatives in India. We could have a very exciting time tracing footmen's, and hopefully have a gathering in Castlefreagh, maybe, of footmen from all over the world.
Hi Christy, how are you?
Hello again.
This is Ian. This is the man doing the documentary. This is Christy O'Donovan. A local man here knows all about the Footmans and the O'Driscolls and the people of Dunoon.
Meeting with Michael O'Mahony and Tim Feen, I was excited to finally see the last home where John Footman lived before his fateful trip to India, once we could find it.
But you think the building was over the ditch here, do you? Road down to Ballacone.
This is the road straight on down to the corner.
This is Ballacone here.
Yeah.
Oh, picture, Brian?
This square here now.
Yeah.
Quite likely.
Quite likely, yeah. We might be able to check that as well, you know. Yeah, on the Griffith renovation.
After searching for some time, there it was. Oh, that's the one?
Yeah.
So this would have been...
This is the original. Yeah.
Nearly 200 years after John's departure, I and the film crew were standing at the barely discernible pile of cobbles. That was John's last home in Ireland, now thick with overgrown nettles.
Ian, these are nettles, and these are the plants that people lived on in the time of the famine. These and grass. They had nothing else to eat.
So this would have been outside their home.
Yeah,
and they would have plucked them
growing wild, and it's the only nutrition they had.
This could possibly have been John's last meal before he took his final walk down to the Belachouan beach to set out on his lonely journey, eventually landing on the other side of the world.
And tonight I leave my best friend, as I leave you both behind. For you, my love in Ireland, will be always on my mind.
Ian, it really has been an amazing experience for you and for me, because I never expected it to be, I never expected it to be like this. Really. I mean, we'd get so much information, we'll get so many places to see, and also the place where John Footman actually started. So for me, it's something which is, of course, it's not very, very personal, but I am feeling so emotional. And
I too would not have imagined that I could see, I could be seeing the place where probably he and his brothers and his father would have been going out fishing. As the historian Tim and Michael O'Mahony, the genealogist, were saying that if you are in Dundee, where we visited Dundee and his house where he left to India, he said most of them would have been coming here fishing, commercial fishing, to sell the produce in Dundee. So to be here probably 200 years later, because he was born in 1826 and here we are in 2016, so 190 years later to the date that he was born, and he would have 3 other elder brother and 2 elder sisters who would have been probably walking the same beach, walking the same. Absolutely. They could be the same stones over here. They literally could have been the same stones over here that I'm touching now, and he would have touched, going back 7 generations. The name is over. Dudley's dad's one house. Yeah, it's an apartment now.
Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you too.
Hi, Dudley. Happy Easter.
Same to you.
Nice seeing you. Nice seeing you.
So long.
Happy Easter.
Happy Easter.
Same to you.
Thank you.
Nice of you all to come down all the way here. This was old Little England once upon a time.
Happy Easter.
Same to you.
Yeah, happy Easter.
Bless you.
Nice to
and
see
all
you.
the Lord's blessings.
Yeah.
Easter.
Happy.
Same to you. God bless you.
Yes, that's my dad. He was a driver right away from the 40s, and he retired in 1969.
This is his dad, my great-grandmother's brother. So this is, now Teresa de Silva's Agnes' mother, right?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Quite right. Patrick
Okay.
and...
So this is also...
Private John Footman, 2nd Madras European Regiment.
Yes.
Enlisted 26th and 28th of January, 26th to 28th of January 1847 on unlimited service of the Madras Infantry.
Yeah.
Described on enlistment as a laborer, age 21, 5 feet 6 inches.
Yeah.
I mean, the way
Yeah.
things have been preserved.
The Hyderabad footman family was a large, extended family and lived vibrant, loving lives. Dudley's father and John Footman's grandson, Melvin Footman, lived past 90 years. He had 3 sons, 11 grandchildren, and many great-grandchildren when he passed away.
The Footman clan, the greatest advantage they always enjoyed in life was they never worried about tomorrow.
The Footmans.
And I'm following that footsteps. Don't worry about tomorrow. Do what you do today. Tomorrow will take care of itself.
Yes, sir.
And don't ever look what happened yesterday. You can't get it back.
Okay.
And they follow the instructions
And that's the best way to live and enjoy your life. If you think what you did wrong yesterday, will you change it?
Ten. 3 brothers and 7 sisters.
Now tell me all the names now from A to Z.
Pardon?
Tell me all the names first.
No, not Dottie, Olive first.
Olive,
Dottie.
Wilfred.
No, then
Winnie, no?
Your daddy comes, no?
No, he's saying the girls.
Only the girls.
No, all.
All in the line.
Olive.
Dottie.
Vivian.
Catching up on the Footman clan with Dudley on Easter Sunday was wonderful. I was also compelled to pay my respect to relatives who have passed. The knowledge that we wouldn't exist in India but for John Footman was sobering. After visiting the extended Footman family in Hyderabad, I travelled back to Ireland, determined to learn all I could about the remaining Footman clan. On a stopover in the UK, I had a chance to meet with several descendants of my great-grandmother, Nana Aggie, at a gathering of the South London Anglo-Indian Association.
I left in 1955, which is a long time ago, but I feel very comfortable in the UK. The majority of the people didn't know what an Anglo-Indian was. They didn't understand what an Anglo-Indian was because none of the English went abroad except the service people. And only the service people understood what an Anglo-Indian was. But the general public didn't know. When I went to Reuters, they didn't know what an Anglo-Indian was. And I then said to them, said to Reuters, I'm Indian. Because my passport said I was born in India. And I said, I'm an Indian. And then I realized that I was not Indian, and when I had my British passport, it said I was a British subject. That's when I realized I'm not Indian, I'm Anglo-Indian, I'm British.
You know, we are Anglo-Indian, right? So the thing is, you can choose your friends, but you cannot choose your parents, can you? So you're born an Anglo-Indian, there's nothing you can do about it. You have to learn to handle stuff. I mean, it is really difficult because, you know, you're like not here or not there. You're like in between, you see? Because we've come here, now we've got used to this culture. And in India, it was a different culture altogether. We still go back.
My stepmother and stepfather decided to come to London to get work and all that. And we left India in December, beginning of December 1960. And we arrived in London on the 9th of December 1960 at night time. It was freezing cold. I arrived with a t-shirt, sandals and short trousers. My connection with the Footmans is my mother's mother is Agnes Footman. That's my connection with the footmen. And of course I know my uncle. My father, he was English. And like I said, he was and he married my mother, who was Agnes Footman's daughter. But we never ever talked about Ireland or London, England. It's only now that we got older, you trace the family tree, and then we find out that, you know, we come from, our family history comes from London and Ireland. I don't know, because I'm not considered as English or Irish. I'm not considered, you know, Indian, so just Anglo-Indian, you know what I mean? That is my culture, and I'm proud of it.
Issues of mixed heritage can be very complex and nuanced. The term Anglo-Indian was coined by the British during their rule over India. It included people of mixed races from English, Irish, Scottish and Welsh. I have my roots from Ireland, so I prefer the term Irish Indian rather than the generic moniker Anglo-Indian. John, hi. We met yesterday.
Hi,
Good to meet you.
Good to meet you too, yeah.
Hello, how are you doing? Nice to meet you.
Yourself.
Yeah, good to meet you.
It's lovely to meet
Lovely
you.
to meet you, yeah. I met John and Nora yesterday. So we're tracing, we must have said we're tracing John Footman's journey to India.
My father was John Footman as well.
Is it? Is it? Yeah. So I was telling.
He came from Airfield, Listow.
Listow, Dundee, the John Footman who came to India. Around the same area,
Oh, he came from the same area?
Same area, and sailed to India. We were showing John the documents over there. And so I got interested tracing his footsteps back to Clonakilty and Dundee and Listow, and got all the records of his baptism. And he literally started the Footman family in India. Every footman in India owes their existence to John Footman.
There's a lot of them there, is there?
Lots of them, at least about probably 400-500, all over India. But in Hyderabad, where I was born, probably around 50-60 in Hyderabad. Most migrated to Melbourne. I had a chance to sit down with 3 other members of the Footman clan, Nan Murphy, Catherine O'Sullivan and Mary McCormick at the O'Donovan's Hotel in Clonakilty. We were joined by Nora Murphy to try and determine how we are related.
Was it a pub? I think
Yeah.
what it was, they met in the pub and they said, "Oh, you're Irish," and he says, "Yeah, I'm from County Clare." And Paul goes, "Oh, he's I'm from County Cork." And your son says, "What part of County Cork is he from? Or was he from?" And he said, "Around Clonakilty." And he said, "Oh, my mother's from around Clonakilty. I wonder, would you know her?" And he goes, "Oh no, you probably wouldn't," he said, "because my mother's name is a very unusual name. You'd never have heard of it." And he said, "Well, sure, tell me anyway. I might know them." And your son goes, "Her name is Footman." And my nephew started laughing and he goes, "That's funny," he said, "because my grandmother is Footman, so we're related." Imagine.
I got the army record. In fact, I got the sailing record from Southampton.
Did you really?
Yeah. Got the sailing record from Southampton. I think Southampton, or one of the ports that the British would use. And those years it was via Cape of Good Hope, so it was no Suez Canal. So it was around the Africa, and then go to India. So it's probably 3 to 4 months, or maybe more.
My God!
And he came to Madras.
Wow.
John Footman. His father was also John Footman, and his mother's name was Joan Collins. All from the Dundee area.
Okay, I never knew any of that.
And then literally, when we done all the research, he was literally started the Footman families in India. He had, I think, 6 sons and 2 daughters.
But what I would love to know is, where did they come from first day? Like, this is not a West Cork name, Footman. Because we were saying probably they worked in Castle Freak.
They worked in, many of them worked in Castle Freak. And this Footman family, because my granddad's cousins from Jew and Burnett. And she has a lot of information in Canada. She's born in India also. She's my granddad and she are first cousins. She got a lot of information, and they worked at Castle Freak in the grounds. They used to be looking after the horses and the labour, doing the labour work.
Where did the name come from? But they were saying that
there must
time
have been
what could have
somebody-
happened is that whatever job you worked in an
That's
estate,
what I thought.
your
They were
name was
footmen.
changed.
They were footmen.
Like if you were a footman, you became a footman.
Footman,
if you were a
yeah.
baker,
That's
you became
exactly-
a baker.
that's what I
If
thought.
you were a porter,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
became a porter.
Smith also.
Smith, you
Smith,
became a
yeah.
smith.
That to me is the logical.
So they were footmen,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah,
That's the
what-
logical
yeah,
explanation,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
because they said 1847 would have been the famine time, peak of the famine.
Yes.
And then they said he would have probably, said I'm getting a bit of money or
Yeah.
income from it was the Irish Fusilier unit in the British Army.
Okay.
Yeah, so he must have said, we got the record of him joining and the salary. So it was
Amazing,
good. It
isn't
was
it?
good money.
You see,
then.
he probably went and joined the army so that he could actually make money to be
Make money.
sent home.
Maybe
but
send
that's
home,
why
yes.
my uncle
did
keep
it as
his
well.
family alive.
So your uncle was Patrick Footman, the
Yes.
one in the Navy.
Yes.
It'd be interesting to go back. I was trying to do that. Go back maybe one more to see if there's the common footman, 17 something or whatever. Yeah, that'll be. We always knew that. Growing up in India, just going
Yes.
back to us,
Okay.
we had the Christian names. Like I have Michael. That's my dad's name, but like a footman or I'm trying to think about it, Farquharson. So we had all these names over there, and people used to say like, "How did you get these names?"
Yes, yeah.
It
And
was
you live
always
at Hyderabad.
Hyderabad.
Hyderabad. Because I
yeah.
was saying just before you came into the other girls that many years ago, I remember our local priest came to my grandmother's house. Now I think I might have been only going to secondary school maybe, and they did make contact. Some of your relations in India made contact with our priest.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Like footmen people?
Yeah, footmen.
Oh, from India.
From India.
Oh, okay.
Now that's about, I'm gone 40, it's probably 50 years ago.
50?
Yeah.
Wow, I wonder who that was.
But the problem at the time was, it's a bit embarrassing, they wanted to come and visit us.
Okay.
But we would have to help out with the money as well.
I wonder
So
from Hyderabad?
Yes, 100%.
Oh, then it would be just that's the only footman family would be the
It
ones
has
I
to be,
mentioned.
yeah, it is, yeah. But I remember at the time, the priest coming and God, what's he coming for? I don't know if you realise that, but there are footmen in India, and they would like to come, and it was something about like that. Maybe we would help with some of the fare.
So
And
would-
that was not feasible at all at that time,
Yeah.
And that was it. There was no more. But I do, because when you came on the scene then 2 years ago, I said the penny dropped. It is the same people.
Yeah, of course.
So 50 years ago.
Yeah.
There was somebody.
And that's what I said. Somebody was coming from here to India. I just can't. Nobody seems to remember who that person was. But the same one who I just showed you, they're from Hyderabad, and they said yes. There was somebody coming from Ireland living in our house for a few weeks or maybe sometimes a month or more. But it was their granddad's cousin from Ireland.
Yeah, I don't know who that.
Yeah, and I just.
But that has to be now. Now it makes more sense now. Then they did seek to come here.
And you think it was about 50 years ago?
There
So
was
that
60s,
somebody from
60s,
Ireland.
70s, yeah.
60s, 70s.
That could be the same person, more or
Yeah.
less.
And my great grandmom, Agnes Footman, would meet the person. So he would come by himself, no family. So he would come and spend.
So it was a gentleman.
Yeah.
Who is
And
it?
he would come and spend about 2 weeks with her. And he would spend another 2 weeks with her brother, Melvin Footman. So he would stay in his house for 2 weeks. He would stay in.
And he came from Ireland.
From Ireland, yeah. And I think they used to bring him to my granddad's house because I lived with them.
It
and they
wouldn't
would
have
say,
been my
"This is-"
uncle.
Somebody used to come at least 3
He
times.
was in
He would come.
He was in England, you see.
It could have been your part. It could have been
Patrick.
your Uncle Patrick.
Somebody would come there. We knew this is.
And did they say about what age he was? Was he a young
He was
man or?
no. He would have been. I can't. But I just could remember.
Can't remember.
They would say somebody from Ireland, and who's this person? Because we knew grandaunts in England, because many of them migrated after India got independence. Because when India got independence, the Irish, British, Scottish were allowed. They would get the British passports.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, as soon as India got independence, so many people chose to
Go back.
take the British passports and go back. Like my
And-
grandmom's family, all 9 of them left India. Only she stayed behind.
Nice to meet you, Cheryl. Sorry about that.
You too, Jacqueline.
This
This
is
is my
another-
brother's son, Darren.
Hi, how are you? He's another footman.
Darren.
Darren Footman.
Hello, Darren. All
Darren.
the footmans are down under now.
You'll have to visit.
So glad.
You'll have to visit.
I'm thrilled that the name is being carried on.
Why don't you come down to Australia?
Okay.
I've got my mom. My dad's passed on. My mom lives in Canada, in Toronto. I've got two other sisters in Toronto.
All right.
So we are a family of 5. So 2 sisters in Toronto and 3 of us here in Melbourne, in Toronto.
All right.
If you remember, I introduced myself as Derek.
Derek.
Cheryl is my elder brother's daughter.
Okay. All right.
Mark Footman. Mark Footman.
I'm writing it all down.
Mark was the eldest.
I had no idea that this is riches as far as I'm concerned. It's a real treasure trove.
Why don't you come to Australia, Jackie, and then you can meet all the footmans?
You know, I'm thinking about that's the place to go, but I don't know if I could take that 18-hour train flight. I almost lost it going down to New Orleans a couple of years ago, and that was just a few hours.
Just have a few drinks and then you can relax in the flight.
I'm going to take that under advice. But it's wonderful to meet you people and to know that the name is carrying out, and it's, we're the same family. We're the offspring of John and Joanna. So it's just amazing.
So another interesting aspect of this is that many of the families still here in Ireland are oblivious to the fact that they have relatives throughout the world. And in the case of John Footman, who would have guessed that a young man from this estate would have ended up building a life and building a family and having descendants through 7 generations in India. It's a beautiful phenomenon to contemplate and part of the unexpected aspects of life. But there are probably many such stories in different parts of the world that have yet to be uncovered.
First of all, it was delightful to Skype with my distant relatives in Melbourne. I'm delighted to know that I have relatives in Australia, in India, and I'm sure many left in Ireland as well. More than anything else, I think I really have a desire to visit Ireland, and in particular the West Cork region, where the Footmans came from. It makes me feel more connected, not only to the people that were caught up in the Irish diaspora, but it makes me more open and understanding, I would think, of other people, other immigrants and their experience. Seeing how the past is continuing to affect the present. And basically, I'm very happy that I was able to have this experience. But it does throw into high relief, as far as I'm concerned, specifically with respect to Ireland, how the famine impacted and continues to impact, in my view, the political situation in the United States. I certainly am proud of my Irish heritage. I don't want to sound romantic here, but I do feel as if I have a special connection to the people.
To me, in a way, people dying of famine, it's a scandal. And we have so much food, and we discard so much food. It's hard to think back then. People were dying of hunger. I find it very difficult to understand that what went on in the famine times, where like, if I'm going to bed and I'm hungry, I can make a piece of toast or have a snack. But the idea of maybe going for days on end and eating nothing, it must be, it's hard. I find it hard to make contact with that idea of how they lived their lives.
Desperation those years,
It was, and like parents seeing their children malnourished must have been a horrible reality for them and a horrible sight. That I suppose we take so much for granted today, and we don't. I suppose we're not thankful enough, really. You take things for granted.
Of course, yeah. We don't bother about food. It just has to come.
It will always, we imagine, it will always be there, and there'll always be enough food to feed us. And I sometimes think of Trump at present. Like, if Trump understood why the people went to America in famine times, and I think there might still be famine in parts of the world that would dearly love to go to America for the basics of life, and could add something to the country. But I don't think Trump understands like the people of Ireland were so thankful that America was there.
That's right.
And that they got the opportunity to go from the famine in Ireland and the starvation in Ireland to a country where they could find jobs and make a living. They were so thankful. Now, if there was no America there, so many more Irish people, millions more, would have died.
Would have died, yes.
Yeah. And I always think Trump seems to be very dogmatic as regards
to migration.
Immigration. I don't know, just...
Thank you, Sean. Just one last question. Is there anything that you would want to add other than what we've already asked you?
I suppose looking at, if we modernize it in today's world, if we contextualize it to bring it forward, it's the world is in a very difficult place at the moment, and I think all nations are challenged, and we've had the incidents on the border with Mexico and the United States. We have the people from Africa trying to get into Europe. I'm sure there are issues in India and other parts of the world. I know that Australia has its challenges as well. So, I suppose in terms of how they dealt with it at the time, it seems like it was, it was automatic that people just went to America. But, people were challenged as well at entry point. Prices were raised by the American government at the time on the British ships. They imposed a minimum increase in the charge. So steps were taken to stop people entering the countries, because of their condition of health and the worry and concern that they were going to be, I suppose it wasn't an issue of jobs then. Jobs seem to be a big issue nowadays, and that they're taking our job scenario. But then it would have been a different scene in that it was about health, and it was about the people arriving with different diseases and that. So, it was a very sort of blunt instrument that they used. They just put the prices up and tried to stop people at a particular social level entering. So, look at the story. The Irish story is something I think you can relate to today. It can be related to many other countries around the world, and it can be related to so many different challenges that people had and continue to have as we struggle through all our daily lives, no matter what nationality we are. I think that's just really what I'd like to add at the end of it. And at the Dunbrody, what we like to say is, and we have it as a tagline, that we celebrate the past to commemorate, we commemorate the past to celebrate the future. And we remember what these people faced, and we look at what they faced. And then obviously we commemorate those who were unsuccessful in their journey. But we celebrate those who made it and who were able to make a huge contribution to all aspects of world affairs and life. And made, wonderful, life opportunities for their own families. So it's an adventure of, success over adversity and achievement over adversity.
It's been an interesting journey for me, tracing my roots back to Ireland and my ancestor John Footman, during which I met footmen from all over the world. I sit now here and think about John's journey to India,
as an economic migrant during the peak of the Irish potato famine. His story resonates even today as we see around us migrants running away from their home to seek refuge in better parts of the world. And as a descendant in India, we are so thankful to John Footman, who of course would never see his descendants as we are today in India.
One day these tides will wash and wane and offer up the nameless slain, and children walking on the beach will see the bones chalk white and bleach, the tiny skulls with baby teeth, carrion cleansed of mortal meat. Current carried to these lands, dug from sands by tiny hands, inquiring then from whence these came, and we cannot answer for the shame.
You think we're letting that caravan come into this country? You can forget it.